Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be covering my first round of the 2023 Chess.com Daily Chess Championship. As you may have been able to guess already, I did win the first round because there is a video of me winning the second round already out on my channel. So yeah, similar to last video, I will be covering my most interesting games, talking through some of my thinking, and hopefully keeping you entertained and maybe teaching you something along the way as well. If you have any questions about any of the moves, feel free to just post them in the comments. I will read all the comments. I don't get that many. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so first things first, let's look at the outcome of the whole thing. So as you can see, I won the round with 20 points out of 22, losing 2 games, one to second place and one to third place as well. And as you can see, 2 guys finished on 19 points out of 22, so it was a fairly close affair. And there were loads of timeouts as well. So everyone from here onwards didn't even make a move, and they simply lost on time. So I was essentially only playing against these 4 people in round 1. And despite the rating disparity here, they put up a very good fight, and I really had to come up with some good decisions to win this first round. So yeah, let's get into the games. Okay, so the first game I'm going to show you is really just a miniature game, and it's really just a lesson in how not to play chess, and a reminder to always keep your king safe, especially in the opening, and especially as black. So as you can see, the accuracy here for my opponent was not very high, and the game is a very short one. As you can see, it's a one-liner here, and the game starts out with normal development from me, e4. My opponent plays b6, not necessarily anything wrong with that. I just bring out my pieces, c6, which is already not great. You really want to get some other pieces out, or just get your bishop out once you've made this opening here. And I go for a bit of a scummy move. I go for the 4-move checkmate, scholar's mate, the oldest trick in the book, thinking that my 1100 rated opponent might make a mistake or might react poorly to it. And exactly that happens. My opponent ends up playing f6, which doesn't lose on the spot yet, but is just very weakening of your king's safety and of the pawn structure in front of the king as well. So this is really not a good move. And I just keep developing, and here my opponent unfortunately ends the game already with the move g5. This is a massive blunder, as it blunders checkmate in 1 from the queen. The game has already ended and it hasn't even started yet, really. So please always keep in mind, never play this kind of stuff when your king isn't castled. So yeah, without further ado, let's move on to the next game. Okay guys, so welcome to the second game. So this is a very interesting, just clean attacking game that I wanted to show you. As you can see, this was quite an accurate game from both sides, but I managed to seize the initiative and just never really let go of it. And so we start off with fairly normal development. We get e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and I play bishop b5, which is the Ruy Lopez opening, or the Spanish. Nerd. And we just get normal development here. These are all book moves. I assume that my opponent is using the opening database, just like I am, for his daily games. And in this position, I decide to play c3 and d4 to really grab some space in the center and seize the initiative. And so that's exactly what I do. I play for d4, we trade, and now I get my bishop to this really nice diagonal where it will attack this pawn, where my opponent will possibly castle later on. And so he castles, and I play e5, opening the scope of the bishop, at the same time attacking this knight and seizing some more space in the center. And so we trade again, and his knight moves to e8. And this is where I felt like I was making steps in the right direction, because knight to e8 is an unproductive move in my opinion. So this boxes in his rook, and also this knight doesn't have really any productive squares to go to immediately. As you can see now, I play queen d3, which the engine doesn't love. The engine prefers to put some pressure on this knight with the bishop, But here I was simply threatening checkmate and developing pieces with tempo, which I thought was sensible and practical in this sense. And so my opponent blocks the checkmate with g6, and now I develop my other bishop, attacking this rook, which is currently trapped. And my opponent decides to pose a counter threat by forking my bishop and queen over here. And so I have to deal with that first, and I play queen e2, and we trade. And now he decides to block this attack of the rook with his knight, which was the only move to keep the rook in the game. And so I just keep developing, and my opponent decides to play c5, which is slightly inaccurate. And so I just keep getting my pieces into the game, getting my rooks onto these open files, getting them into active positions as much as possible. And now he plays queen c7, which I think is already the final mistake of the game. As you can see, the engine likes this very much for white, and that's because it gives me the chance to play knight d5. And knight d5 is a really powerful move because it forks the queen and bishop, and that means that the queen has to move to guard the bishop. And the only square where it does that is back on d8, and so that's what my opponent plays, queen to d8. The problem with that move is it gives me the chance to play knight f6 check, which reveals this attack back on this bishop and also checks the king. And so if you simply moved your king, my rook would come in and take this bishop, and you would lose the game immediately. And so you have to trade this piece. But now I get my pawn onto f6, and now you will lose your rook because this knight has to move. And so the knight moves, and I win the exchange. And so in this position, I decide to play rook e7, which is a multi-purpose move. So it adds pressure to this pinned bishop on d7. It protects this pawn on f6 by interposing, and also it adds pressure to this f7 pawn for later. And so my opponent decides to play queen c7, which unfortunately doesn't work because now the bishop is still pinned just the other way, and so I can just add pressure to this bishop more by playing knight e5, and this also incidentally attacks the f7 pawn. And so here my opponent is just kind of overwhelmed, and he plays rook d8 to guard the bishop for a third time, but the problem is I can play queen d2, which adds a fourth attacker to the bishop, and you can't add a fourth defender, and it also threatens this queen h6, queen g7 checkmate, and so in view of this, my opponent resigns in this position. Alright, so this third game is really the most frustrating one of the whole round. This is where I made a really stupid mistake, and this is really a lesson in not underestimating your lower rated opponents, because this guy, Zenryo, came up with a really, really nice idea, and I missed it completely until it was too late, and the rest of the game is just me trying to claw my way back from a worse position. And so let's dive into it. So I try to play something slightly unusual. I play b3, and this is all kind of part of my strategy to get my opponents out of their comfort zone, especially when they're lower rated. I don't really want to play against their opening preparation. I really want to just try and get positions that are perhaps difficult to maneuver, where I can start to outplay them perhaps. And so here I start this kind of very traditional attack where you get this bishop out and you attack the e-pawn and you pin this knight. And so here my opponent already makes a mistake. He plays bishop d7, which unpins the knight, but the problem is I can trade off the knight and take the e-pawn. And so now I'm already better off out of the opening and feeling quite confident in this position. And so we keep developing our pieces. Here I decide to check and move back. And we just play normal developing moves. And in this position, I get slightly careless. And you can see if you spot the idea. Just tell me what you would play here as white. But the problem is that I played castles, and this loses the game on the spot because I missed the fact that he can play bishop g4, which traps my queen on the spot, so I have no squares. And at this point in the game, I was very frustrated because I was better out of the opening. I was in a comfortable position, and my carelessness just kind of would cost me the game right now. And so I realized that I have to at least get a piece back for the queen, but I can't really save it. And so I take the bishop and I play f4, and we trade a pair of pieces. And now at this point, I'm just trying to create some complications, trying to create some counterplay. But objectively, of course, black is completely winning here with queen for just a piece and a pawn. And so I decide to get my pieces into the game, expand in the center a little, and just try for whatever will come up. And here I decide to play f5 to perhaps crack open at his king safety and maybe get an open line for my rook. And so we trade here, and here he actually blunders a pawn, and so I get one further pawn back, which I was very happy about. I mean, at this point, any bit of improvement is very welcome. And so here, he actually blunders an exchange as well. So my knight on the rim here protects this bishop, and I skewer the queen and rook, so that when the queen moves, that I will be able to capture the rook. And so he moves his queen, and I attack it one more time before capturing the rook, and now I take. And in this position, as you can see, I'm still worse, but it's improving slightly, but it's going to be very difficult to get back to equality here. And so I get my knight back into the game. I don't want to trade, because the fewer pieces that are on the board, the more the material advantage that he has will become noticeable. And so he offers another trade of the knights, and I decline another trade of the knights, and I get this really nice outpost here on e6. And in this position, I play somewhat inaccurately. I play rook g7, thinking that I can infiltrate with the rook. The problem is my opponent has the material advantage and can sacrifice his queen for the pair of rooks. And so in this position, I'm simply down a rook for 2 pawns, and will likely lose this game. And so I lose another pawn, and he attacks my knight, and I desperately try to hang on in this position. But it is rather hopeless, and yeah, I'm just playing on to see if I can get a trick somehow. And here my opponent plays slightly carelessly. He allows my knight to his knight to get attacked, and instead of moving his knight here, he plays c6, attacking my knight. The problem is that here I can make use of danger levels, and I can move my knight and attack his rook at the same time. And so now his rook and his knight is attacked, and so he has to move his rook to protect the knight. And so he goes rook d4, but the problem with this move is I can play knight f5, kicking the rook out of this square, and wherever the rook moves, I'll be able to capture the knight with the king. And so I will get a piece back, which I was very happy about, but the problem is the position is still losing. And so he moves his rook. Note that discover checks here in this position don't work, because I would simply capture the rook that is checking me. And so yeah, he moves his rook, I take the knight, and he starts winning my pawns. And in this position, I need to try and get all the pawns off, or get my pawns promoted or something. And I try my best here, but the problem is his h-pawn is simply too fast, and I can't really do much to stop it. I push my pawns as far as I can, but now he's just about to promote, and now, even though I'm 1 square away from promotion as well, this is actually losing, because he can, for example, play rook d1, and if I were to take, then he would queen with check, so that's a very nice trick that he spotted there. In this position, I simply sidestepped so that if he queened, that I could queen as well. And part of me was hoping that he would perhaps take my knight, let me queen, and then queen as well, because in this position I could then take the rook, and we would actually end up in a drawn position, and I would have saved the game. Unfortunately here, my opponent plays very accurately, and he checks me again, and when I sidestep, he simply slides to the back rank. And in this position I resigned the game, because I really have nothing left to play for. If I played b6, he would simply take, and if I don't promote on the next move, then I'm simply too slow, and you will promote and checkmate me very soon. So in this position, I resigned, as I said, and my opponent goes on to win. I was very frustrated to lose to such a stupid mistake, but in all fairness to him, he did convert very well and didn't make any mistakes, even though I tried to complicate the whole situation. So yeah, let's move on to the final game. Okay, so in this final game, I'm playing the same guy who we covered in the last game, and I was very keen to redeem myself in this one for the unfortunate queen blunder that I did against him, and so yeah, I played a similar idea as I did in the last game, where I play this b6 line and I try to get my opponents out of their comfort zone, and I try to play some unusual stuff. And here in this position, this is the same idea, just with black. So you pin the bishop to the king. The bishop. You pin the knight with the bishop to the king, and this attacks this e-pawn. And what white has to do is protect this e-pawn. But what often happens is they play something like bishop d2, which he did in this position as well, and this blunders a pawn. And so, just like in the other game, I come out of the opening upper pawn, so this guy fell for the same trick twice. But nevertheless, I mean, I lost the last game, so nothing's over yet. And so we develop normally, and I just decide to expand on the queen side with c5, and now he has these doubled isolated c-pawns, and so I'm fairly happy in this position because I will have a lot of central control compared to my opponent. He plays c4, and we just keep developing. Here he pinned my knight to the queen, and I decide to immediately fix that, and he decides to take. And so in this position I could have taken back with the queen, but I decided to take back with the pawn, which the engine is not a huge fan of, but I thought was a practical decision to keep my d-pawn, which I thought was very important for the stability of my center. And so we keep playing, and I just play king h7 to get the open line for my rook. And now he offers a trade of bishops, which I do not accept because that would fix his pawn structure, and I'm not trying to help my opponent. And so I just play f5, so that if he decides to trade, I can take back and play f5 again with this nice consolidated pawn on e4. And so that's what happens. He plays knight h2, and I decide to play rook g8, and after this, knight g4, which is apparently a mistake. It's a tricky move because it does threaten checkmate, so if I weren't careful, I could lose the game right here, but I see the checkmate and I play rook g6, protecting it. And after f4 by my opponent, trying to perhaps dislodge the rook here, I just play f5, which kicks the knight away and also consolidates this e4 pawn. And after my opponent moves the knight away, I just jump in with my other knight, knight d4. So this is a super nice square here on d4, protected by a pawn, and as you'll see in a second, it also threatens a bunch of tricky moves, because after my opponent plays h4, which is a mistake, I can actually play knight f3 check, which forks the king and the queen, and the rook pins this pawn to the king, which means that you can't take back or can't take this knight with the pawn. And so my opponent takes the knight with the rook, which is the only reasonable move, and I simply capture the rook back. And in this position, after my opponent plays queen f2, he simply resigns the game in view of the fact that there's not really much to do for him. He's down the exchange, he's down a few pawns, and I have very obvious attacking ideas here on this open G file, and I think he simply realized that he's not winning this one. And so with that, I win the first round of the daily championship with 20 points out of 22, and I only have an even score against the top two guys. But my good record against everyone else sealed the deal here and made sure that I qualified for the next round. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed that video. Well done for making it this far. As I said, yeah, if you have any questions, anything to say, just pop it in the comments, and I will get back to you. So yeah, thank you for watching, and like, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff that YouTubers care about, and